A deep hum grew from inside the metal box, stabilizing after a few seconds. Through the ventilation slots, a soft auburn light shone. After another moment, static came, strengthening in volume as the components warmed, allowing the rudimentary electronics to operate. I had read about these in my courses, but this was the first time I'd ever seen or used something that didn't have modern hardware. They took time to start working, allow for the tubes to get to where they could conduct and pass signals. Sure, everything in this radio could now easily be made to fit inside a coin, run for decades without any issues, use a fraction of the power, and never have to worry about it catching on fire. But that wasn't the point. This had been crafted by hand. Someone imperfectly soldered every capacitor and resistor, placed the control potentiometers and tube sockets in the chassis. Everything was a little off, not quite lined up. This wasn't just a radio. It was a work of art. I started turning the knob marked, tuning back and forth, listening to the static rise and fall. Occasionally it would break for an instant, only to return to the churning mass of white noise. With a frown, I changed the dial marked band and resumed searching, sweeping the faded red bar behind the glass. A broken voice came for a moment. A high-pitched yelp came from me as I zeroed in on the man speaking.
Romano's count is 0-1 as he waits. Blankenship nods to his catcher, and the slider is outside for ball number 2. His face says it all. That should have been a strike, but he's behind now. Blankenship shakes off the first few signals, now finally seen something he likes, and is setting up for his next pitch.
I smiled, sitting back and listening to the game. Other than it being baseball, I had no idea what was happening. Sports wasn't something I enjoyed. In fact, this was the first time I could ever remember listening to any. It really didn't matter what was playing through the speaker, honestly. This was about having found and fixed an ancient radio, destined to be scrapped, and now given a second chance. When I bought it, the old man said it was for something called shortwave. I had no clue what he was talking about. It was a cool old radio. That I had gotten the thing to work was more than enough to make me ecstatic.
Hit hard to left field. Romano knows it, and so does Blankenship. That one's out of here. A solo blast, and we've got a tie game going into the bottom of the 5th.
I spent the next few hours sitting there, clueless about what was happening, but unable to turn away. When the game was over, I began searching the frequencies once more, occasionally picking up a voice or bit of music I was unfamiliar with, but no more than a second or two of something coherent before it was lost to static. Once again, I changed the band dial, selecting number 3. Looking at the tuning face, I assumed it was searching the frequencies that had a 3 to the left and went from 4.5 to 11. A bit of music came through the hiss as I swept past 8. Easing back, the notes came through clear, though tinny and somewhat muffled. As they played, I felt as if I recognized them, but couldn't say from where. My mind went to old cartoons watched when I was a child. Joyful, high-pitched notes that played for a few seconds before breaking off.
Mildenhall Center. Bell strikes.
The voice was that of a man, but hollow and metallic. Artificial.
00577-01601. Execute.
What the hell was this? A series of synthesized notes played, and the voice spoke again.
Mildenhall Center. Bell strikes. 00577-01601. Execute.
Fumbling in my pockets, I found my phone and began recording a video just as the notes began their progression once more.
Mildenhall Center. Bell strikes. 00577-01601. Execute.
This time, the cartoon theme played. Once it finished, the frequency went silent. I kept recording for a few minutes in case the transmission played again. So that same song played before the man spoke. I struggled to keep the phone from shaking as I moved in to record where the frequency was. He said that phrase twice before I started filming. What I got was the third time, and between each was a series of tones. I think I got some of that. It's 10:25 p.m. right now. I don't know if it means anything or not. I stopped recording. Even though it was warm in the room, my skin was drawn, and I was shaking. Only the hum of the radio kept it from being completely silent. Ah, Vic, my star pupil. What's happening? I chuckled at the gray-haired instructor. He called everyone his star pupil, even if they never came to class and didn't know one side of a diode from the other. It was one of the things I admired most about him, how he made everyone feel welcome and that they could learn the material even when they struggled. Taking out my phone, I set it on the table and looked up. I finished fixing that radio I told you about. When I was testing it, I found something weird. His eyes narrowed, mind already thinking about what could be wrong. What's the issue? Oh, there's no problem with the radio. It works beautifully. Listen to a baseball game for hours. I opened up the video I recorded. I heard this afterwards, on a different frequency while I was playing around with it. No idea what it was, but it kind of freaked me out. The instructor's eyes widened as the man spoke. When it finished, he played it again. Sounds like a number station. Take it you've never heard of them? I shook my head. Sitting back in his chair, the instructor gazed into the distance, rubbing his chin for a moment before speaking. They're used to pass information, usually to foreign agents. They were used a lot during the Cold War, but since that ended and satellites are used for comms now, there aren't a lot anymore. My skin tightened. Should I have not recorded it? He gave a laugh. There are people whose hobby is to find and record them. I'm sure if you posted that to an online group, you'd get mad props for finding it. Do kids still say that? Mad props? I shrugged my shoulders. I really don't know. He stood, handing the phone back to me. It's interesting. A really cool find. Nothing to be worried about. Might play again around the same time in the next few weeks if you're interested in following it, or just curious to see if it will play again. Usually won't be on the same frequency, though. I'd recommend looking anywhere on that same band. Without thinking, I nodded. Thank you. The instructor gave a warm smile. And great job getting that radio fixed, too. Sounds great. Those old tube units are a lot of fun. Returning his smile, I nodded again and walked out of class. "33 new messages. I'd only just joined the group and posted my video a few hours ago. I never expected it to get this sort of welcome. One by one, I began going through some of the replies. Cool find. Took me years before I was able to get one. Set up my rig to sweep the 40-meter band. Beer in hand and ready to scan. Effing noob. Well, maybe they weren't all welcoming. It was almost 10, so I went ahead and turned the radio on. A few moments later, the gentle hum of the transformer provided a background to the static. Opening up the forum chat, I began typing. Settling in for the next hour to see if it comes back, on the same frequency as last night. To the side of the chat window, other group members began appearing. Good place to start, but it'll probably be somewhere else. Set up to scan from 50 to 20. If it comes back, I'll see it. I fought the urge to begin searching for the signal as others typed. My plan was to stay on the same frequency and wait. At 10:20, the static gave way. Picked up a carrier at 8.255. No mod, but it's active. 5 minutes later, the cartoon music played.
Pompeii Live. 0101. Victor. Mike Oscar immediate. Victor. Mike Oscar immediate. Condition 1.
A series of synthesized tones played. Damn, it's real. What does it mean? The message repeated 2 more times, same as the night before, followed by the cartoon jingle, then went silent. It's fake. I was Special Forces. None of it means anything. Which squad, Roger? Meal Team 6? We've all seen your profile pic. As much as I wanted to laugh at the insult, I just couldn't. Like the previous night, my skin had drawn tight. Here's the recording for anyone who didn't catch it. The person who wrote the message included an audio file link. I clicked on it.
Pompeii Live. 0101. Mike Oscar, immediate. Mike Oscar, immediate.
I frowned, playing the recording several times. At first, I thought that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But no, it wasn't the same, I was sure of it. For a moment I hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Did anyone hear something different? I spoke out loud as I typed for some reason. I heard him say Victor, Mike Oscar immediate. No. Wasn't what I heard. Sorry, mate. I rubbed my eyes. It was late, and I had been awake since before 6 that morning. The keyboard clicked as I typed. No worries. Must be my mind playing tricks on me. The chat's conversation shifted to other topics. Who was able to transmit furthest? How many countries they had been able to contact? Some anecdote about how chili from a particular truck stop went right through them, leaving their bowels ravaged for days after. That was the point I bid the group a good evening and shut down the computer. Turning off the lights, I realized I'd forgotten to turn the radio off. And as I reached for the knob, the cartoon notes started playing from the speaker.
Victor, 01. Victor, 01.
I pulled out my phone and began recording.
Stand by. Receive. 0300 Zulu. Foxtrot key. 00155 Papa. Set. Vegas 1. Set. Vegas 1.
Synthesized notes played and the message repeated twice. When the cartoon music ended, there was nothing but static. Shaking, I crawled into bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark for a long time. Eventually, sleep must have come. My instructor rubbed his chin as the recording ended. His eyes were unfocused, recalling information deep within his mind before he spoke. And this played afterward? So you aren't sure if anyone else heard it? I nodded. Yeah, could be I misheard the first time, but in this one, he definitely says Victor. The instructor gave a shrug. Victor is part of the phonetic alphabet, so it isn't unusual, just weird to hear. Same thing if your name happened to be Charlie or Sierra. What do you make of the rest? He leaned forward onto the table, hands clasped together. I think it's referring to the next transmission. 0300 Zulu sounds like 3 a.m. Universal Time. Foxtrot key is indicating the next message will be 1.55 megahertz above the current freak. I took my phone back from him. And set Vegas 1? His eyes glazed over, the look of a mind fighting to bring back memories lost for years. Vegas was code for setting communication restriction levels. When Vegas 1 was called, there were no transmitted comms, radio silence. My heart began beating slow as the strength of my legs left. This is an interesting mystery you've come across. Thanking my instructor, I stumbled into the hall and out of the building. I had no idea what to do with myself, and this felt as though I'd discovered something I shouldn't have. None of this was meant for me to hear, yet I was in the middle of it. It didn't matter, the messages were out in the open for anyone to come across. I had just been the one to find it, and now I was part of whatever was happening. Stopping at one of the cafes along the street, I bought a coffee and sat outside, letting the aroma do its best to soothe me before taking a sip. 3 a.m. Universal Time. Pulling out my phone, I searched for what time that would be here. 10 o'clock. Almost the same time as the last 2 nights. As much as I didn't want to, I had to see if it would be broadcast again. This time, I'd record all of it, to be sure nothing was missed. The cream did a good job of cutting the coffee's bitterness. It tasted so good, I found myself going back to order another cup. It was only after drinking half of that second cup, I asked myself why I'd gotten coffee. I couldn't stand the stuff. Blindly, I slapped at the clock until it was silent. My head throbbed. My mouth was fuzzy and dry with a strange taste. Turning back into the pillow, I muttered a curse. I hadn't even remembered falling asleep, only static breaking on the radio. I tried opening my eyes as I rolled onto my back, but they just wouldn't. Too much light. After a few minutes, I tried again. Everything was blurry and out of focus. Eventually, I stood and walked to the kitchen. I needed something to get the weird taste out of my mouth. After taking a drink of water, I spit it into the sink. That had just made it worse. Maybe I have some coffee. Last time my father visited, I had bought a tin of cheap instant coffee for him. Luckily, it was still there. Getting the water set to boil, I sat on the couch in the living room to wait. Reaching for the open pack of cigarettes, I pulled one out and lit it. Almost immediately, a tingle ran through me, relaxing my body. I took another drag, sitting back, finally starting to feel better. With the cigarette still between my lips, I walked to the kitchen and poured boiling water into the mug, dissolving the clumped powder. Giving a couple stirs to make sure it was completely mixed, I tossed the spoon into the sink and returned to the couch. The coffee was vile, bitter and acrid. After each drink, I took another puff, alternating between the two until both were finished. Why are you smoking? I looked at the pack sitting on the table. Several cigarettes were missing. You don't smoke. No, I never had. I never even thought about wanting to try. Where the hell did these come from? I rubbed my face in frustration. My mind was more clear, but the fuzziness remained, hiding around the edges. None of this made sense. What the hell happened? Looking at my phone, I realized I needed to get to work. Tossing the cigarette pack into the trash, I went to the bathroom and gargled a bunch of mouthwash to get rid of the mix of ash and burnt beans on my tongue. It didn't really work, but covered the taste enough to get going. Putting on a clean set of clothes, I walked out the door. The door slammed shut as my backpack struck the couch, its contents now scattered across most of the room. I fell onto the cushions next to the bag. What a nightmare of a day. How was I going to pay for rent and classes now? My foot tapped the floor as my fingers went through my hair. With a sigh, I leaned back, looking at the ceiling. It was almost 10. Out of habit, I turned the radio on, letting it warm up. I didn't have any desire to hear what was said tonight. It was a compulsion. I had to know. My foot tapped faster as the cartoon theme played.
Victor 01. Condition Vegas 1 remains in effect. Tango 4 Echo 1-1. Priority Alpha 001 Kilo.
As the rest of the message played out, I laid back, closing my eyes, the world falling silent around me. Rain spattered against the windshield as the wipers glided back and forth, valiantly trying to clear the view. Dull beams lit the dark, empty road stretching ahead. Cracking the window, I tossed the spent cigarette out. My arm pumped, working the lever to roll it up without too much water getting in. What am I doing? With a quick motion, I pulled the car over, stopping on the shoulder as rain continued falling. I had no memory of heading out, nor any idea how I got there, or even where I was. Looking down at the dashboard, I realized this wasn't even my car. What the hell is going on? My hands and fingers ached. When I flexed them, they felt stiff. Peeling off the gloves, I looked at them with what little light was in the car. They were definitely swollen. Pulling the gloves back on, I muttered a curse, then eased the car back onto the road. After driving a while, the surroundings finally started to become familiar. When I got to a point where I was a few miles from my apartment, I pulled into an empty parking lot and stopped. Turning off the engine plunged the world into darkness. Only the rain, gently falling against the car's chassis, let me know there was still anything out there. I sat, fighting the urge to light up another cigarette. After a while, I opened the door and got out, checking to make sure nothing of mine was left behind. I had no idea how I got this car, and I didn't want anything that could be traced back to me in it. For whatever reason, that was important. The rain had lightened considerably, to the point where it wasn't even a drizzle, really. My eyes finally adjusted to the dark. There was nothing here. No businesses or homes. It was pretty much deserted. Even so, when I started walking, it was in the shadows as much as possible, moving slow so as not to attract attention. I didn't walk directly to my apartment either, looping and doubling back a few times instead. It added several miles, but after a few hours, I was climbing the stairs to the apartment door. The rain returned as I twisted the knob, hard and heavy, washing away any trace of my presence. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the pack of cigarettes. Inhaling deeply, I let it wash over me. The cartoon jingle played from the radio.
Victor 01, Bravo Zulu, Tango Splash. Condition Vegas 1 remains in effect.
It was nearly 4 in the morning. Finishing the cigarette, I turned off the radio and went to bed. Around me, a wave of laptops and bags closed. The magic mark of 5 minutes till the hour had struck, and every student instinctively knew to leave. I had sat through class, pretending to pay attention. My hands still ached. When I had woken up the morning after, they were bruised and swollen to the point where I didn't know if I'd be able to hold a pen or click a mouse. They had gotten better, but not nearly enough. And I needed a cigarette. God damn, I needed one bad. Following the lead of the others, I robotically packed my supplies. Once outside and a short distance from the building, a dull orange flame came to life. The satisfying crackle of shredded leaves burning, working their magic, calming my nerves, restoring a sense of balance and clarity. It had been a few days since that night, and nothing had happened. No news reports, no gossip around campus, no knocks at my door demanding I answer questions. I hadn't turned the radio on since then either. It sat on the table, unplugged. Ordering a coffee, I made my way back to the apartment. Looking at the box on the table, I finished what remained of my drink. Picking up a screwdriver, I removed the back cover and pulled the tubes from their sockets. With a flip, I turned it over to loosen the board from the chassis. Taking a pair of wire cutters, I began clipping out each component. Soon, a pile of brightly colored capacitors and resistors formed next to the tubes. It felt like I was setting fire to a masterpiece painting. In the end, there was nothing but the chassis and board, sprouting bits of wire and clumps of solder. Dumping the tubes in old pillowcases, I smashed them with a hammer. They went into the trash, along with the other components. A few hours later, the trunk of my car closed, loaded with everything of mine from the apartment. I'd never been one who had a lot of frivolous things. Being able to pack quickly and leave seemed like a good way to be. To never let possessions take over your life. Soon I was pulling onto the road. I'd never see this place again. Once on the highway, I began dialing my phone. Mom, Dad, it's Vic. Wanted to let you know I'm coming home. I paused for a moment, trying to decide exactly what to say. Things just aren't right here. I need to figure out who I am, what I'm doing with my life. Hopefully you understand. Should be there in a few days. I'll call again once I've stopped for the night. I love you both. It was a relief being able to leave a message and not have to talk to them at that moment. I'd have time to think about what I'd say and what I wouldn't. Turning on the satellite radio filled the cabin with heavy, distorted guitar riffs, helping to break the monotony of the featureless road. After a few songs, the cartoon jingle played.
Victor 010001. Mission complete. Bravo Zulu.